My father believed that the right person always ends up with the right thing. He said it to me once, when I was 12 years old, standing in his wood shop while he sanded down an old chair nobody else wanted. I didn't understand it then. I do now. When the lawyer finished reading the will, my sister didn't even try to hide her smile. My father passed on a Thursday in October. The leaves were turning, and the house smelled like the cinnamon candles my mother used to burn before she left us when I was 7. My sister flew in from Seattle first class, naturally, and spent the 3 days before the funeral rearranging things in the house that didn't need rearranging. She moved my father's reading chair to the corner. She took down the photographs on the hallway wall and stacked them on the floor. She said she was making space to breathe. I didn't say anything. I had learned a long time ago that saying anything to my sister was like dropping a match into dry grass. Her name is Renee. She is 41 years old. She has a husband named Derek who has never once looked me in the eyes for longer than 2 seconds, a daughter in private school, and a laugh that sounds like it costs something to produce. She left home at 18, came back only for Christmas and emergencies, and spent most of those visits reminding everyone within earshot how well she had done for herself. I stayed. That is the part nobody ever talks about. I stayed home. When my father's knees got bad, I drove him to physical therapy every Tuesday and Thursday for 8 months. When he got the diagnosis early-stage Parkinson's, I was the one sitting in the neurologist's office taking notes on my phone. When he couldn't manage the stairs anymore, I moved into the downstairs bedroom so I could hear if he fell in the night. I gave up the apartment I had been renting across town. I gave up the relationship I had been building with a man named Aaron, who eventually got tired of competing with caregiving for my attention. I did not give those things up bitterly. I gave them up because my father was worth it, and because no one else was going to do it. Renee sent money twice. I know because my father told me, and he said it the way people say things they want you to understand mean less than they appear to. Renee sent something for the heating bill. That was it. That was the extent of her contribution to 4 years of her father's decline. The lawyer's name was Mr. Aldridge. He had an office downtown with wood-paneled walls and a window that looked out onto the parking garage of the building next door. He read the will on a Monday morning, 11 days after my father's funeral. Renee sat across the table from me, in a cream-colored blazer, with her hands folded, like she was waiting for a check she had already calculated. My father left Renee the house, the 4-bedroom colonial where we had both grown up, on a quiet street in Raleigh, North Carolina, recently appraised at $680,000. He left her the investment accounts, not enormous, but solid. He left her the car, the furniture, the contents of the house. And he left me a storage unit, specifically Unit 114 at Caldwell Self-Storage on the east side of town. The monthly fee had been paid through the end of the year. After that, it was my responsibility. Renee looked at me from across the table and pressed her lips together in a way that was supposed to look sympathetic and did not. "I'm sure there's something meaningful in there," she said. I drove to the storage facility that afternoon. I didn't go home first. I didn't call anyone. I just got in my car and drove east on Route 70 with the key Mr. Aldridge had given me sitting in the cup holder, and I tried to remember if my father had ever mentioned a storage unit. He hadn't. In 4 years of Tuesday and Thursday drives, of medication schedules and doctor's appointments and late-night conversations when his hands shook too badly to hold a glass, he had never once said the word storage unit. Caldwell Self-Storage was a low concrete building off a service road, the kind of place that exists at the edges of cities without anyone quite noticing it. The woman at the front desk had a bun of silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain. She pointed me down the east corridor without looking up from her computer. Unit 114 was at the end of the hall. The lock was heavy, a quality padlock, not the cheap ones people use when they don't care much about what's inside. I stood in front of the rolling metal door for a moment before I put the key in. The smell hit me first: wood shavings, linseed oil, the specific warm smell of things that have been worked on with hands for a long time. I pulled the door up. The unit was the size of a single-car garage, maybe 12 feet deep, and it was full, not chaotically. Not like someone had shoved things in without thinking, but carefully. Organized. The way my father organized everything. Along the left wall there were shelves, floor to ceiling, built from solid oak, sanded smooth. On those shelves were finished pieces, most of them. A writing desk with dovetail joints so precise they looked machine-made. A rocking chair with hand-carved details on the back posts, acanthus leaves curling up toward the headpiece. A blanket chest with brass hardware and a fitted interior lined in cedar. A side table with tapered legs and a single drawer, the pole made from a piece of antler. In the center of the unit, 3 more chairs in various states of completion sat on a canvas dropcloth. Against the back wall, an armoire 8 feet tall, walnut, with carved door panels depicting a forest scene. Deer, trees. A stream suggested by inlaid lighter wood. I stood in the doorway for a long time. My father had been a high school history teacher. That was what everyone knew about him. He coached junior varsity baseball for 12 years. He drove a sensible sedan. He kept his lawn cut and his gutters clear, and he brought casseroles to neighbors when they were sick. That was the version of him that existed in the world. The other version, the one that apparently came here, to Unit 114, for years without telling me, was this. I counted 17 finished pieces before my hands started shaking. I called my friend Dana from the parking lot. Dana has known me since college, and she is the kind of person who asks the right questions. I told her what I had found. There was a pause on her end. "Do you know what any of it is worth?" she asked. I didn't. Not yet. I went back the next morning with better lighting, a work lamp I bought at the hardware store on the way, and I spent 3 hours going through everything. Underneath the shelves on the left side, I found flat files, the kind architects use for blueprints. They were filled with drawings, hand-drafted plans for every piece in the unit, dimensioned and detailed. Alongside the drawings were notes in my father's handwriting, the cramped, precise cursive he used when he was thinking carefully. Wood species, joinery decisions, finish schedules, dates. The oldest drawings were dated nearly 20 years ago. He had been doing this for 20 years. There was also a folder, manila, labeled in black marker, for Ellie. My name is Ellie. Inside the folder was a letter, 3 pages in my father's handwriting, and a smaller envelope containing a business card with a name and phone number written on the back in different ink, added more recently. The business card was for a woman named Patricia Holt, a specialist in American studio furniture at an auction house in New York. The letter took me a long time to read because I kept having to stop. My father had known about the Parkinsons for longer than he told me. He had been coming to this unit for years, working in the evenings and on weekends, building things. He said he couldn't give me the house. Renee was the older one, and she had children, and he knew I was capable of building something for myself in a way that Renee, for all her confidence, was not. He said he was sorry. That sounded like a compliment with a sting in it. He said the furniture was mine to do with as I wanted, sell it, keep it, donate it, but that he hoped I would at least let someone who knew what they were looking at see it first. That was why he had added Patricia Holt's number. He said one more thing at the end of the letter, and I am not going to share it here because it belongs only to me. But I will say that it was the most he had ever said to me about what our 4 years together had meant to him, and I had not known I needed to hear it until I read it on the concrete floor of a storage unit while a work lamp buzzed quietly beside me. I called Patricia Holt that afternoon. She answered on the second ring. I told her my father's name. There was a pause on her end, not confusion, but recognition. "Daniel Marsh," she said. I was wondering when I would hear from his family. She had spoken with my father 2 years earlier. He had sent her photographs of several pieces. She had told him. In an email she offered to forward me that what she had seen represented some of the finest contemporary American handcraftsmanship she had encountered in a decade of specialization, and that if the rest of the work was consistent, a properly structured auction could be a significant event. She flew down from New York the following week. She spent 4 hours in the unit. She wore cotton gloves and moved slowly and didn't say much, which I was learning was a sign of someone who is genuinely engaged with what they're looking at. When she was finished, she stood in the doorway, with her hands at her sides, and told me that she wanted to put the collection, she called it a collection, into an upcoming sale of important American craft and design. She gave me an estimate. I sat down on the concrete floor. The estimate was not a guarantee, she said. Auction results vary. But based on comparable sales and the quality of what she had seen, she believed the collection could sell for somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million. The armoire alone, she said, could be the centerpiece of the sale. I called Renee that night. I don't know exactly why. Maybe I wanted to tell someone. Maybe I wanted to see what she would say. She asked how the storage unit had gone. I told her I thought Dad had left me some of his woodworking things. That's sweet, she said. He did love that hobby. I said yes. I said I thought so too. I didn't tell her anything else. The weeks that followed were complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. Moving the collection to New York required specialized art handlers. You don't move furniture worth that kind of money in a rented truck. It required insurance riders and condition reports, and a contract I had a lawyer review before I signed it. The lawyer cost money I didn't have in a readily liquid form, so I sold my car, bought a used one, and covered the difference. I was living at my father's house while the estate was settled, technically Renee's house now, though she was back in Seattle, and had told me I could stay through the end of the year. She said it in a tone that suggested she was doing me an enormous favor. I said thank you in a tone that suggested I agreed. Two things happened in the third week of November that I was not prepared for. The first, Renee called and said she had decided to list the house in January and asked if I could start thinking about my timeline for moving out. This was 6 weeks away. The second, a man named Griffin, who had apparently been doing some work on the house's HVAC system for Renee, remotely arranging contractors from Seattle, let himself in one afternoon while I was at the storage unit doing a final inventory. He was not there about the HVAC. I found out later from a neighbor that he had been in the house for nearly 2 hours. I found out from a second look at the storage unit that nothing was missing, but someone had been there too. The lock had been tampered with, not cleanly, and one of the flat file drawers was not closed all the way in the way I had left it. I called Patricia Holt. Then I called the lawyer. Then I changed the lock on the unit, added a second one, and hired a local transport company to move the first 3 pieces to a climate-controlled facility in Durham that Patricia's team had used before. I did not tell Renee I was doing this. I did not tell her what had been appraised. I did not tell her what the collection was likely to be worth. I want to be honest about something. I thought about telling her. There were nights in that house, sitting in the kitchen where my father used to do the crossword on Sunday mornings, when I thought about calling Renee and telling her everything, and seeing whether it might change things between us, whether we might somehow find our way to being sisters in the way that word is supposed to mean something. Then I would remember her face in the lawyer's office, the pressed lips, the folded hands, the smile she hadn't quite managed to suppress, and I would make another cup of coffee and not call her. The sale was in March. Patricia had titled my father's section of the auction, "The Marsh Workshop." 40 years at the bench. She had done her research. 40 years turned out to be accurate. She found records of my father's very first pieces from when he was 26 years old, before he was married, before Renee or I existed. He had been doing this his entire adult life, quietly, in the background of the life everyone else saw. I flew to New York for the sale. I sat in the back of the room in a dress I had bought for $38 from a consignment shop, and watched people in considerably more expensive clothes bid on the things my father had built with his hands in the hours between his real life and his sleep. The armoire sold first. It went for $240,000. The room made a sound when the gavel came down. By the end of the evening, the total was $1,400,000. I sat in the back of that room for a while after it was over, while the staff moved around me clearing things up, and I thought about a man sanding down an old chair in a woodshop while his 12-year-old daughter watched. I thought about the right person ending up with the right thing. I thought about how long he had been preparing this for me without my knowing. How every Tuesday and Thursday drive and every late night and every form I filled out on his behalf had been witnessed, even if he hadn't known how to say so out loud. The letter said what he couldn't say, and the furniture said what the letter couldn't. I am 29 years old. I used to work as an office manager for a pediatric dental practice. I was good at the job. I liked the kids. I don't work there anymore. I have a business now. It's small. I sell American craft furniture pieces by living makers, people who work the way my father worked, in spare rooms and rented studios and garages. I found a small storefront in Durham. The sign above the door says Marsh & Co. I pay my rent. I am building something. Renee found out eventually. I'm not sure exactly how. I suspect Patricia's auction catalog ended up in front of someone who knew her. She called me in April. She did not ask how I was doing. She asked why I hadn't told her about the furniture. She used the word shared, as in, why hadn't I shared this with her? I thought about the question for a moment. Then I told her that Dad had left the unit to me specifically, that everything in it was mine legally and without question, and that the way she had managed the estate and handled those final years, or hadn't handled them, was something she would have to make peace with on her own. She told me I was being vindictive. I told her I was being accurate. She hung up. She has called twice since then. I have not answered. The storage unit is empty now. I go by sometimes anyway. I'm not sure why, habit, maybe, or something else. The lock is gone. The shelves my father built are still bolted to the wall. The woman at the front desk still has silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she still doesn't look up when I walk past. But once, in January, when I came in and the corridor was quiet and I was walking slowly the way you walk when you're not quite ready to arrive somewhere, she glanced up and said, "Your father was a very polite man, always said good morning." I stopped walking. "How long did he come here?" I asked. She thought about it. "Long as I've worked here," she said. 11 years. 11 years. I stood there in the corridor for a moment with that number sitting in my chest. "He never said anything about what was in there," she added. "But he always came out smiling." I thanked her and walked to Unit 114 and stood in the empty space that still smelled faintly of linseed oil and wood shavings. And I thought about my father, 11 years of Monday evenings and Saturday mornings, building things for a daughter he didn't know how to say enough to out loud. The right person ends up with the right thing. He wasn't talking about the furniture. He was talking about knowing that someone saw you, about leaving proof, about a locked door, and the only key going to the one person who had been there all along. I understand it now.